Hi everyone, Jai Hind and welcome to the platform of StudyIQ IAS in English. My name is Bhavar Singh Sur, MX India 115th course and qualified civil services in 2012, and I welcome you on the platform. Now in this session we'll be talking about battlefield. Yes, this basically I'm talking about the documentary that had been made by Tokchom Boruns. Now this is an anti-war documentary which had been or which will be it will be premiered in Mumbai International Film Festival in 2026. Now, this is very important because ultimately the makers of the documentary, they have said that when you go through this movie, so ultimately you will be able to understand the structural and even the historical and the material deficits or the roots which are there for the present conflict that is there in Manipur. And that is why we'll be deconstructing the complete, the movie or the documentary film that is there. Now, this is very important because over here, the movie, it actually mirrors the war. Now, why does 80-year-old World War II memory matter in 2026? So, this is the historical theatre that we are talking about in 1944 when there was World War II. And Boran Tokchom's documentary Battlefield, it actually explores the legacy of the battles of Imphal and Kohima. Now, it reveals how the international armies, they turned Manipur into the militarized zone at that point of time in 1944, reshaping the indigenous structures and introducing the modern arms into the region, and also leaving behind the intergenerational grief that was there. Now, the modern, the crucible that you are seeing at the present time, it is the ethnic conflict that started in May 2023 between the valley-dwelling Methi it is the Methi tribe and the hill-dwelling Kuki-Zo tribe that acts as the structural echo of what was there in 1944. Now, the physical, geography of the conflict and the proliferation of the armed combatants over here that trace directly back to the seeds that were sown during the World War II era and also the post-colonial integration that happened of the Manipur. Now, over here, this is very important because ultimately you will see that there is the geological and the psychic embedding of the militarization that happened in Manipur. Now, over here, the focus of the documentary is on Rajeshwar Yumnam. Now, he is a researcher who is excavating the rusted World War II relics and unexploded shells and even the forgotten bones. Now, over here, the core, assumption is that the violation is or the violence is not merely a sequence of the temporary events that are there. Actually, these are not temporary events, but when it comes to them, they alter permanently the ecology and armory of the region as well. Alright, over here, this is the first principle that the war is beneath the ground, and here the earliest insurgent movements in the northeast India, they relied directly upon the armory that was left out or the ordnance that was left out after the World War II and surplus weaponry that was recovered after the region. Now, these are the the complete timeline that you can see when it comes to the recent conflict that we are seeing in the Manipur. There was the Battle of Imphal and Kohima in 1944, and it is considered as one of the fiercest battles when it comes to World War II. And the local communities, they watched the colossal global armies fighting and also sparking the early ideas of the self-rule in the region. Now, in 1949, what happened was that the Manipur was merged following the devastation that was there after the World War II. And its integration in the Indian Union sparked the historical friction and even the birthing of the secessionist sentiments which we see in the region. Now, in 1980s, there was AFSPA that was imposed broadly in the region. And ultimately, the insurgents utilized the leftover Second World War military infrastructure and even the topography of the Manipur for the jungle guerrilla warfare that we see in the region. Now, in 2023-26, this is the time period that we have seen the complete ethnic cleavage and the clashes that erupted from May 2023. They are still continuing in the region, and the physical divide mirror the operational zones that were there in 1944 campaign. Now, over here, it is very important that you can see that there are the unhealed fractures when it comes to the complete Manipur. And you can see that this is the ethnic balkanization of the state that we are witnessing. And ultimately what happened was, or how the World War II geography, it maps into the modern fault lines that you can see right now. Now, over here, the entry or the valley or versus the hill binary is that something that was utilized during the Second World War II as well. When you see the complete Manipur, you will find that most of the Meitei tribe, they live in the valley. And when it comes to Naga and Kuki-Zo, they are in the hilly regions that is there. And ultimately in World War II as well, the Imphal Valley was the focal point of defense, while the surrounding hills, they were hostile transit corridors, and thereby the same geography you can see even today when it comes to the ethnic conflict. Now, over here, it is very important that there is the porous India-Myanmar border that was at that point of time as well. And right now also, it is unfenced for the decades. And that allowed the Japanese advancement in 1944. And today we are seeing that this porous border, it is being used for smuggling the illicit arms into the region, as well as for the illicit, opium trade as well. So again, we can see that this borderland dilemma was present at that point of time in 1944 and today as well. Now, there is asymmetric geopolitics. When it comes to the foreign armies, so in Second World War, it was the Japan that was there, and right now you can correlate it with the contemporary anxieties that we have with the Chinese influence and the Myanmar civil war that is spilling directly into the region. And again, these are the unhealed fractures that we are talking about, laying the complete correlation between what happened in 1944 and what we are witnessing in Manipur today. Now, over here you can see that when it comes to the metric dimension, so we have the valley area which is dominated by Meitei tribe, and then there are the hill district where Kuki-Zo and the Naga, they are there. Now, when it comes to the complete initiative, the conflict matrix, you can see that the displaced population in the Meitei-dominated valley, it is nearly about more than 30,000 people, and there is more than more than 35,000 which are the internal refugees when it comes to the hill district. And ultimately, you can see that more of 60,000 people had been internally, they had been displaced in the region. Now, when it comes to the valley area or the Meitei, they have sought the withdrawal of the ASPA, and ultimately what happened over here is that the weapon proliferated majorly by the looting of the armory, and there is approx more than 4,000 arms that is there in the region. Also, they want the retention of the state legislative machinery, because when it comes to the governance structure, so that is majorly dominated by the Meitei tribe. But when it comes to the Kuki-Zo dominated region, so there are the buffer zones which are guarded by the central forces right now, and they got the arms through the illegal cross-border smuggling, and there is the demand for separate administration as well. Now, there is right now, we can say that we have more than 40,000 of the people from the CAPF that had been deployed in the state, along with the active militarization of the local civil society that is taking place because of the arms proliferation in the region. And also, there is imposition of Article 355, through which the center has the duty to protect any of the state in the case of internal or external, aggression. Now, over here, it is very important that beneath the ethnic conflict, you can see that this is about the resource scarcity as well. Because underneath the clash that is between the valley-dominated the ethnic groups and the hill-dominated ethnic groups, it is basically, you can see that there is intense contestation over the land and forest in the region. Now, when it comes to, the Meitei tribe, that was, the complete ethnic clash started with the scheduled tribe status that was declared for the Meitei tribe. Now, right now what happens is that the hill-dominated, the ethnic clans that are there, they have the complete, you can say the complete lineage over the land rights which are there in the hill regions. Now, over here, if the valley, it expands, or the Meitei, the rights that are given to the Meitei, so ultimately that will lead to the clashes between the Kuki-Zo ancestral land rights which are protected under Article 371C, that provides for the hill area assemblies as well, or hill area councils that can be constituted. So ultimately there is a zero-sum game where one gets advantage and the other one is at disadvantage, and that is why there had been the clashes that we have seen in the region. There is also asymmetric federalism, where you can see that the constitutional architecture of Manipur, it creates differential rights for the hills and the valley rights. So ultimately there is that asymmetric federalism that is at the core of the communal friction that we see in the Manipur, and this built-in asymmetry is viewed by the Meiteis as the exclusion, and by the hill tribes that are there as their last defense for protecting their land rights and for protecting their forest as well. Now, over here, it is very important that this film, Battlefield, it highlights how the unresolved historical grief is weaponized in today's circumstances. Both communities, they draw from the different historical narratives to legitimize their claims of the nativity as well as sovereignty in Manipur. Now, you can see that when it comes to the source of arms, so the source of arms in the region is majorly by the looted state armories, and there is 55% of the arms that is because of that. Then there is the porous border smuggling as well, that relates or that is basically responsible for 25% of the arms in the state. Along with this, there is the surplus Second World War dumps as well, and the domestic fabricated or the pumpy guns which are there. Now, when it comes to the modern violence that is there in the Manipur, it solely or relies heavily on the looted and the smuggled weaponry, but at the same time you can see that there is the historical infrastructure of the insurgency in Manipur that was built upon the weapons that were there in or the caches that were left in the dense forest after the Second World War. Now, over here, it is very important that there are two conceptual foundations. The first one is about the geological violence, where it is the concept that defines how material leftovers of the war, that is unexploded shells, the rusted artillery and the military trenches, they physically remain embedded into the landscape. Now, it is the decades later that these materials are literal and metaphorical. They are the raw materials for the new political and the armed resistance that we have seen in the state. At the same time, the second conceptual foundation is about the transgenerational trauma, where the grief that is not systematically addressed through the truth commissions or the reconciliation rituals, they does not disappear. Alright, it just metastasizes, and that is again very, very important, because when it comes to the film, it shows how the descendants of the Japanese and the British soldiers, they still are searching for the closure in Manipur, paralleling the complete, the current unaddressed ethnic trauma or the ethnic clashes which are there. Now, over here, you can see that when it comes to this movie, this draws a parallel. And this is basically where it says that the excavation, it is a kind of reconciliation that can happen. Now, over here, when it comes to the movie or the documentary that had been released, you can see that it acts a bridge when it comes to the protagonist, that is Rajeshwar Yumnam. And here he is doing a three-tier democracy or track 3 diplomacy, where he is helping the Japanese and Britishers for searching their ancestors as well as local families. He is helping them to find the graves and converts the space of trauma into a space of bonding, a space of shared human grief as well. Now, this is the core lesson that we can see for the present day Manipur as well, where reconciliation is very important. And now this reconciliation, it cannot come through the administrative partition or the military force that is there. Now, this reconciliation, it must start with the shared remembrance and the honoring of the collective suffering of both, whether it is Meitei or it is the Kuki-Zo tribe that is located in the region. Now, this is very important because the landmark is about the structural healing, and there should be the constitutional safeguard that should be symmetric, and ultimately we must harmonize the hill and the valley divide through the proper land use planning without undermining the historical safeguards of the indigenous tribal groups that is under Article 371C. There is or there should be the Truth and Reconciliation Commission as well, which should be a non-partisan committee-led TRC that should be inspired by the South Africa's transitional model, which should address the past ethnic cleansing, the mass displacement, and even the historical grievances which are there in the state. There must be the disarmament, and that should be absolute. That is very, very important, that there must be absolute disarmament of the state-backed and the ethnic militias which are there in the state, coupled with the robust technology-driven fencing of India and Myanmar border. So there must be no illicit drug trafficking and even the illicit, the smuggling of the weapons as well. And there must be, this is very important, there must be a shared memorization or the space that should be constructed, where the inclusive memorials should be constructed that should commemorate the local impacts of the Second World War and even the ethnic unity. So it is not the partition that is or that should be kept in mind, but it is the unity that is or that should drive the complete thinking and the policy making in the state. And it should not be led by the government. Please remember, Yes, government is a structure, but at the same time, the unity, the peace in the region, it must be driven by the community that is there. So there are two pillars. Always remember, when it comes to establishing the peace in the region, so there are two pillars which must be utilized. The first pillar is the law and order. That is the negative, pillar, or you can say that is the negative peace, where the peace is basically derived by coercion. And here we have the state. Ultimately, NIA operations, armories, they must be secured, and ultimately we must neutralize the violent factions as well. Now that is the duty of the state. But there is another pillar, and that is the social trust, which is the positive peace, and that is the requirement that we have for Manipur today, where it should be anchored by the civil society. The cultural dialogue must be there. There should be cross traveling, where Kuki is traveling. There is the news that was there where the chief minister, he have hailed the Kukis who have traveled to Imphal. Anti-war cinema, that is like battlefield, and even the truth telling, that should be there. And these are the two pillars that can sustain the peace in the region, and that is very, very important. It is not just important for India, it is important for the people which we are losing, and they are the Indians as well. So that would be all in this session. But if you are preparing for the civil services, then you can join the GS Foundation batch on the StudyIQ platform, which are based on the SMART model. Now this batch or this foundation batch is for the people or the aspirants who are preparing for the civil services for 2027, 28 or 29. And for enrolling into these batch, you can use the code BRS Live. That will get you the maximum discount on the platform. Now that would be all in this session, but at the same time, do like the session as well as comment your views, and also do not forget to share this session with your friends, and also subscribe to our channel so that you do not miss any of the updates. Thank you. Bye bye. Take care and Jai Hind.